Hey, let's chat about, I want to chat about Interview Valet for a minute.
Hmm.
And I want to talk about other people's audiences for a minute. So I have long been shouting that the fastest way to fill your stadium, build your audience, grow your list, grow awareness about you and what you do is leveraging OPA, other people's audiences. And you can do that as a speaker on stages. You can do that, now video, live stream, and podcast absolutely is a super smart way to leverage this. Now, 23 years ago, when I got started in business, podcasting wasn't really a thing, but I did say yes to every single interview request. Back then we did conference call, like freeconferencecall.com or Blog Talk Radio. You remember Blog
Oh
Talk
yeah.
Radio, all those things. And so I had a rule that for the first year that I was building my online presence, I said yes to anyone and everyone about interviews. And I still attribute my quick ascension and reputation in that space to leveraging other people's audiences. Because Tom, you know, and I know that there are people spending a lot of money to build their audience. Why would I do the same thing? Why would I not just take an asset, which is my intellectual property or my story or my expertise, and then go do that? And so that's where Interview Valet comes in. And this is why I love to recommend you guys. I'll say it because I know you're too nice to say it, but there are several people attempting to do what you do. However, you're the only one I ever recommend. And there's a good reason, because I have 23 years of a reputation to protect. And you have never, ever disappointed me or any of my clients or colleagues. But let's talk about why other people's audience is important. And let's talk about how you guys leverage that for your personalities, like myself, for other business owners, authors, speakers, service providers, literally any expertise-based human can leverage the power of podcasting now. And thank goodness it's so much easier than all the Blog Talk Radio and the stuff we used to do. I do not have my own podcast, full disclaimer, because I'm not disciplined enough and it's not my spiritual gift. And I recognize that. But I can be a professional guest on other people's, and you guys have helped me do that before and helped countless people like me. So why are other people's audiences so important, and how do you guys help with that?
Well, I think you make a great point there that exposure brings opportunity. And I believe the biggest problem most people have is obscurity, right? There's right now with version 1.0, whatever your product is, there are thousands of people on their knees praying for it. And the reason they don't hire you is because they don't know you exist, right? We don't buy the best, we buy the best we know of. And if we don't know of you, how can we work with you? So I think getting out there, and a lot of marketers are saying break through the noise. Let's be honest, that most of the time we're adding to the noise, right? Yelling louder is not getting heard, but getting in on the conversation that your ideal clients are listening to, that's powerful. And one of the things you talked about there was, leveraging other people's audience. You were very specific when you started on the right audience, right? Not every audience is the same. You didn't just go down to, any random street corner and just start talking. You made sure that the people that you were talking to were your ideal customers. And that's one of the things that we'll really focus on, is not just doing more and more, but let's do better and better. And get more out of every appearance. And so that's what we really focus on. We've got a team of 35 now in Europe and North America. And so that's what we've been doing for over 8 years.
That's crazy to me, because I remember when this was an idea. I also remember being in the room where other people told you it was a bad idea, but we don't have to go into that today, but they were wrong. And I'm so glad you hung in there. I knew it was money, and I knew it was so valuable to business owners like us. You said something really key there, and that is get in the right conversation. Get in the right conversation. Stop talking to yourself. Stop trying to be so meaningful or so interesting, and start being interested and be in the right conversation. But what I will say is you can still Google my name and come up with interviews that I did 20 years ago that have been posted, repurposed, turned into books, guides, downloads, whatever. And you guys are really amazing at helping the business owner create the long tail of effectiveness, the long tail of the conversation. So we all went, maybe it's just Southern women, maybe not, but when I leave the room, I'm okay if my fragrance is left behind. I'm okay if they're still whispering about me, as long as it's, positive or, notorious, at least. When I leave the room, I'm okay if I don't just leave an empty space. And you guys make sure that we don't just do an interview for the sake of doing interviews, but doing interviews that I call workhorses. Like, workhorses are anything in your business, you guys, that keep working for you over and over and over and over again. So every interview is an asset. I don't know if you guys use that. I mean, you ought to use that in your marketing. Every interview is an asset that business owners are creating and leaving here, and creating and leaving here, and create like breadcrumbs, all leading back to you, the business owner. So talk to us a little bit about how you leverage that conversation, and how you actually, in my opinion, mentor and teach and are instrumental in helping the business owner do that, even if they're not doing it already.
Right. And you're so right, because the goal is not a podcast interview, right? That's an ego thing. The goal is to grow your brand and to grow your business.
Yes. Your list.
It's just the interview is how you do that, or
Yes.
the physical stage, whatever it is. So with that, we work with people on how do you move someone from being a passive listener to an active visitor to your site, and ultimately an engaged lead. So that's part of it, right? How do you progress them? How do you get business results from every interview? And then how do you get more from every interview? So how, for me, English, I joke, is my second language, IR engineer, right? For me, writing a blog is a homework assignment, but I can talk, and then we take the transcript, and other people turn that into blogs. They clean it up. They make video pieces out of it. They put the social media there. And it's interesting. A podcast can be so many different things right now. If it goes up on YouTube or Facebook, is it still a podcast? Well, SiriusXM just bought a bunch of podcasting companies for content. So if you hear me on the radio, is it still a podcast? I don't care. As long as you hear me. So it's for busy business owners. It's one of the most powerful ways to take a half hour and make a ton of content. And it's not just content that you're promoting, the host is promoting it. And the other thing, Carrie, that I always, you mentioned you don't have a podcast. I don't either. I've been a guest on over 1,200 podcast interviews, and people say, why don't you have one? Well, it's a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of work.
And the other thing too, is it's a commitment, and I'd be tapping into the same audience over and over. Whereas you go onto other people's audience, you get invited into their house, in front of their stage, whatever it is, you're the star there. And they can say things about you that if you said them about yourself on your own podcast would just sound vain, right?
Exactly.
But if they say it about you, you just are nice and say, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. You're so kind. Thanks for saying that. I love it. And I love that those assets stay and keep playing. And I still hear from people almost probably weekly, I guess, from when I was on Dr. James Dobson's radio show, which is now in a podcast. He now has it on replay in a podcast. I hear from people over and over and over again, because that is now planted in several different places. People that I otherwise would not have been in front of. Likewise with Entre Leadership and with the Ziegler podcast and with so many other shows, not to mention that if you are a speaker or you have a message, your impact is so magnified. But being a guest on podcasts can also be work. You don't get to just show up and take the mic, or you shouldn't. You shouldn't. That's the difference between making it an investment and being entertainment. If I'm going to invest in my business, I show up prepared with an asset that I can share to get that, invested and engaged lead, like you mentioned. But you guys have this, I've jokingly called you the fairy godfather of podcasts. It's like you wave your wand and all this magic happens. And that's one thing that I love, is that you enabled me, for the most part, to show up and just spend the money, because your team makes it as painless as possible. You want to address that for a minute, how you don't create an extra job for the guest?
Early on, we had a client that said, I love working with Interview Valet because you let me be the guest and you take care of the rest. And I'm like, that is great copy. I'm going to take that.
So
and
good.
That's really what it is, right? People are smart. They're hardworking. You could have done this all, but it's not the best use of your time. We've got this team. We've got the experience to do that. You're Sinatra. You know, there's a reason Sinatra didn't move all the equipment and book it and all the rest of that. He was the performer. He was the talent. So that's what we're doing. We're getting to know you at the beginning, getting together the one sheets, finding the right audiences. We're introducing you to ideal hosts. We don't pitch, right? You pitch a baseball, you introduce a human being. We prep each person before they go on a podcast. So, you know, we'll tell you beforehand, Carrie, here's the podcast, here's the host name, here's how to pronounce it, background on them, the audience, here's all their social media. So boom, when you walk on that stage, you know who you're talking to. And then even at the afterwards, we always get feedback from the host and the guest, because we want to get better and we want our clients to get better. And it's an ongoing process, and it gets tighter and tighter and more dialed in, and it gets more fun too.
I love it. I love it. And I remember the old, you and I are similar age. So I'll say, I remember the old commercials Vidal Sassoon used to say, if you don't look good, we don't look good.
Yep.
You know, so your job is to make us look as good as possible, because we make you look as good as possible, which opens more opportunities for all of us in the talent bank, quite honestly. The other thing I love is that with these assets that we're building and the social proof that you're building because of what shows you've been on, you get to keep sharing those in social media over and over and over again. The host loves it because you're sharing their content. That's good halo effect for them. You still are getting new exposure to the people they continue bringing into their audience. And, you know, it's like if I'm on the same podcast as other big names or competitors or whatever, you can say, that's basically like if I'm opening a concert for somebody else, right? Oh, Carrie was the same act as that person. Carrie was on that same stage as that person. So guys, the credibility, the value add the other audiences when you leverage this in a really smart way is just invaluable. And I trust you guys huge. What I love, one of the many things that I love about your business is, first of all, you lead it, and I know you personally, but the integrity at which you do business and that your people do business. So they're not sending out blind pitches, they're not sending out mass spammy emails or direct messages. You're saying, who is a match to this audience? Who is a match to this message? You're not just saying, oh, Carrie's, you know, talented and charismatic and a good speaker, which is all true. But you're saying, but what is her message and who does it resonate most with? Because we want to make sure it's a good, you're like eHarmony for business people is what you are. You're eHarmony. You have all the match points and the analysis, and it behooves you to make good matches for them, because then other people make good matches. So what else does a business owner want to know about podcasting, about being a guest on other people's podcasts?
Well, I think one of the things that people struggle with, they're like, well, am I an expert? Do I have something to say? And our mutual friend, Nick Pavlidis, helped me with that early on. Nick's a lawyer. And he's like, if you look at the legal definition of an expert, right, it's someone who knows more by their training, their experience than the average person. Now, you've got something to share with the world. You know, if you're working in your business, you're the expert in there. You've got different things that you could share with them. So what you have to share with people is very, very valuable. And it's going to be how people know you. That's one of those things. The other people are like, well, I don't have the time. Well, if you don't have the time to get on a podcast interview, you probably don't have the time to do your business. You're thinking this is going to take, between preparation and the interview, working with us at least, about an hour per interview. And I can think of all the times that I have jumped on a plane, driven or flown across country to speak to, 200 ideal customers. And I would love the idea of doing that. Instead, I sit at home now with podcast interviews. And from my own office, my own home can talk to thousands, tens of thousands of people over over time, right? It's just not if they were in the room. So
Right.
you've got the expertise, you've got the time, and people will say, well, I don't like the sound of my voice. Well, I'll tell you
No,
what,
don't listen to it.
you don't have to listen to it. Other people like the sound of your voice.
I
And
hate the sound of my voice. I hate it. So I don't edit my own stuff. I don't listen to my own stuff. I can't do it. I don't mind my writing, but I just really have never loved the sound of my voice. But it doesn't mean I still don't have something to say. So you're too nice to say it this way, but I'm a tough love coach. So I'll say it this way. You got to get over yourself, humans. Get over yourself, or you will never have the impact that you were created to have.
yes,
Because somebody else is waiting for you to get over your imperfections to help them with their pain or their problem, or make their life easier, or to help with their time, or help them feel like they're not so alone. And because you're so hung up on yourself, or perfectionism, or procrastination, which basically are the same thing, you are not stepping into those gifts and your voice. And you will get better with time. You'll get better with every interview. I was not born talking. Well, maybe I was born talking like this, but I did get better at interviews over time. But I love it. And if you are somebody who's passionate about a topic or your subject or your business or growth or humans in general, podcasting has an audience for you, quite honestly. So tell me, Tom, some of your, let's just say, because they might say, oh, well, my people don't listen to podcasts, or my market isn't prone to podcasts. Tell us a few common podcast audiences, and then tell us some quirky ones. I'm going to put you on the spot because I didn't prep you for this, but tell me some common ones and then some quirky ones, like that we wouldn't imagine.
The data says 51% of adults in the US listen to podcasts. So,
wow.
And on average, they're above average income and education, right? So there's some people that, are so proud that they haven't read a book since high school. Guess what? They're not listening to podcasts. They're still listening to 80s rock and roll. No judgment there. But
still wearing their jerseys.
Exactly. But the people that are like looking for new answers, they're there. So, you always got the business, the self-help, all those podcasts. Mm-hmm. One of them that was the quirkiest to me that I had ever heard of. Have you ever heard of pickleball?
Yes.
All right. Well, I hadn't heard of pickleball a few years ago when somebody had told me about it.
There's a whole podcast about it?
It's like a dozen podcasts about pickleball. Okay. And so think about it. If you are a manufacturer of pickleball equipment, if you are a coach for pickleball, where are you going to advertise? You're going to get a billboard? No, there's 12 podcasts there that is like fishing from a barrel. And there's different podcasts, military spouses. That's where we get a lot of our half of our team is military spouses. There are military podcasts. And so the riches are in the niches, right? So it doesn't have to be a bigger and bigger podcast. I can think of one that I went on early on. It was good for my ego. I had like 40,000 downloads. I'm like, this is great. Shortly afterwards, I went on one that had a few hundred downloads. And I thought, well, I'm here anyway, right? Guess what? That was like fish in a barrel because every one of those people were my ideal clients there.
Right. That's amazing.
And they know those. Some other ones will have clients that come to us and say, I want to talk to Fortune 100 CEOs. Can you help me? I'm saying yes. But guess what? There's not a podcast that is the Fortune 100 CEO podcast that gets 100 downloads per week, right? No, but there are people that know them. What people would influence them. Often that's a great way to go there. So really, I would say people say, what doesn't it work for? Well, if you've got a very, very, very hyper focused, right? If all your clients are within 10 miles of your driving, national podcasts probably aren't going to work.
Right.
If you're marketing to the hearing impaired, probably podcasts aren't going to work. But besides that, there's the podcast for everybody.
I love it. And you help people get to those places. You're helping people get seen, get heard, be found, and be valued. So stop being invisible. Stop being what did you say? Or obscure. Stop the obscurity. It's it's as easy as being interviewed. And that's the great thing about podcasts too, is I don't have to interview anybody. I love to interview, secretly, I think I probably should have a talk show. I love to interview people. It's my favorite. My teenagers call it interrogation. I call it interviewing, whatever, with tomato, tomato. But I also, with an interview, I can prep them with a few questions or my subject area and let them take off. And I get to just show up and talk about things I love. And, one thing I love to say, I say it from stage all the time, is my dad said to me when I was little, he said, baby girl, if you could find a way to get paid for talking, you'll have it made. So Dad, there you go. You're a prophet. We've done that every time I'm on a podcast, every time I'm on an interview. I can promise you there is a compensation involved. That compensation might be contacts, contracts, it might be credibility, it might be content, whatever it is. I can promise you I am being compensated in one of about 5 ways every time I open my mouth. So Tom, thank you for being an amazing catalyst for those of us that are leveraging other people's audience. It's like you are an audience broker. That's what you do. You're an attention broker. See, I'm just trying to drop all these new phrases for you for your sales copy. I hope you're writing these down. You're like an attention broker. You're helping people pay attention and invest attention into smart assets for our business. So how can people, we'll put the link below. We have a special link that people can check you out and look up Interview Valet. And I know you have some amazing other videos on how to best leverage your podcast and some keynotes that you've done. And we can connect people with all that too. So anything else you want to add? Any last words or any wisdom on when they should start or how they should start?
Well, Carrie, you've heard me say this so often. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others, right? Yeah. What you know could help so many other people. And I believe that the best gift you can ever give someone is introducing them to a new person or a new idea. Every time you get on a podcast, that's what you're doing. So I would urge people, right? If this makes any sense to you, come check it out. I wrote a book. We'll give a free copy of that to anybody that wants that, to explain how this works. You could help a lot of people. They'd gladly pay you. It's only one problem. They don't know you exist. So let's address that on Targeted Podcast Interviews.
Problem solved. You guys heard it first from Tom Schwab, who is the fairy godfather of podcasting. I've used him in my business. I recommend clients from startups to 8-figure business owners to him. He's worked with them and done great no matter what their business market is. So you guys check him out.